Hello everyone and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. Today we're going to continue on with Unit 2, discussing population, more specifically population movement, and today we're going to be looking at two specific theories or models that deal with migration and the movement of people. So the first one we're going to talk about is called the gravity model. Now when we deal with the gravity model, basically what we're looking at is we're just trying to understand and put relationships between interaction and movement between specific places. And so we're looking at why it is that someone might go to a particular place. We're also looking at how likely is someone to move to a particular place based upon the characteristics of that specific place. One of the basic elements of the gravity model is this idea that the larger the place, meaning the larger the population, the more likely it is that someone is to immigrate there. Now, you think about it, you think about the term gravity model, it makes a little bit of sense because when we think about gravity, we think about the larger the object, the greater the gravitational force or the pull is going to be. So very similar with this idea of gravity model and likeliness for someone to move there. The more people there are, the more likely it is that someone is to move to a place. And you think about, if there are a lot of people already there, obviously there are reasons to move to that place. There's probably jobs available. It's probably at least a pretty good place to move to in terms of things that are available for people, not just jobs, but also the services that might be available to individuals, infrastructure that might be there, whether it's sanitation or water or electricity or any of those types of things. So the more people there are, the more likely someone is to migrate there. Also, you think about the types of people that might be there. If an immigrant is looking to move to a place where there are people like them, because again, a lot of times migrants like to move to places where they can find someone like themselves, they can be more comfortable, they can speak to someone in the same language. Maybe they're having a hard time learning the language, someone's there to get them plugged in. There's going to be places that are familiar to them in terms of maybe from their home country, in terms of a place to worship, places to get food at. So it helps them to kind of get plugged into those things. So the immigrant's more likely to find someone like themselves in a larger area with more people just, by chance, because the larger population, the more likely there are to find someone like themselves. Okay. When we talk about the gravity model also recognizes that distance is an immigration factor as well. And basically what we mean by that is the further away something is, the further away a place is, the less likely someone is to migrate to that particular place. So you think about in terms of distance decay. So again, with the gravity model, the closer the location, the more likely someone is to migrate there if they're going to be moving to another location. Again, you think in terms of distance decay. The further away a place is, the less likely someone is to interact with that place. Now, there are a lot of things that can that can mess with this particular model, but again, you have to think about the difficulty of movement for a person. It's expensive to move. It's going to take a tremendous amount of resources. So the person is going to try and go to a place that where they can get plugged in, where they have the financial resources to get to that place. And so when we look at especially international movement of people, that's why you tend to find people are going to be moving to the next best place that is closer to them. And so when we think about around the world, that's why primarily people from Latin America move to the United States. People from Africa are much more likely to go to Europe than to the United States, and similar to from Eastern Europe to Western Europe. That's why they tend to go to those places. From Asia, they tend to go to Australia or Japan rather than the United States, because again, it's much closer much closer. And same again, you think about the idea of gravity. The further away something is, the less the gravitational force is going to be. So the further away a place is, specifically a city, the less attraction it's going to have for an individual. They're going to try to move somewhere closer. Now, the gravity model itself is not perfect because there are several things it does not account for. One thing it doesn't account for are what are called selectivity factors, thinking about people who are most likely to move. So selectivity factors can be things like the education level of a person, how old a person is, job opportunities that might or might not be available in a particular place. All of those things might cause somebody to be willing to move to a location that is outside of this idea of the gravity model. You also can't account for unpredictable human behaviors. People sometimes make decisions that don't necessarily follow the rules or may not make a whole lot of sense in terms of some of the models or theories that we have out there. So people are always going to maybe sometimes go against the grains. But again, the gravity model works relatively well. Now, another thing that might frustrate the gravity model is not only the spreading wealth around the world, but also the improvement in transportation technology that allows a person to move much more easily, much more cheaply from one place to another. And this idea of globalization, meaning that really people are able to maybe get different types of jobs all over the world, they're able to get education, but not only that, stay connected to their families back home. So that might make them willing to go out and try to move to a place where maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. Next, we're going to talk about another theory of migration. These are what are called Ravensteins Laws of migration. These particular laws were developed by a British geographer by the name of Ernst Ravenstein, and what he does is he basically makes 11 generalizations about the movement of people and if someone moves, what are they most likely to do. So the first law we have, and by the way, I've actually looked for all 11 generalizations. I haven't been able to find them, so we're just going to go over some that seem to be most relevant to our course and the things that we need to talk about. So the first one is the first law that he comes up with is that most migrations are going to take place over short distances. Most people are not going to be willing to take long movements when it comes to migration patterns. In fact, if we look at global migration patterns, what we tend to find is that if someone's going to move to another country, they're most likely to move to a country that is next door, that is right nearby their home country. And a lot of times they're going to move from a country that is not very well off, or they're going to move to a country that is is slightly better off than their home country. And within those short distances, they might participate in what's called step migration. And basically, all step migration is they have that person has an end goal in mind, but maybe for some reason they can't get to the end goal in one fell swoop, so they'll make several stops in between. One of those reasons for a stop might be what's called an intervening opportunity. Now, an intervening opportunity is some sort of positive thing that happens in a person's life, and as they're migrating, instead of getting to their end goal, they find something positive. Maybe they find a job in a particular place, they like the weather or the climate or something, and so they decide to stay in that place that they've stopped at. They might also find what are called in their movement intervening obstacles. Basically, an intervening obstacle is simply something that keeps someone from finishing their migration or getting to their end point in their migration movement. So intervening obstacles can be any number of things. You might have something like financial difficulties, the cost that it takes to move to a place, they run out of money. You might have immigration issues in terms of maybe the country won't allow them in, or maybe they're having trouble crossing the border. Maybe the country, with all the issues with terrorism and things like that, you could have an issue where certain groups of people are not allowed into a country, any of those types of things. They might run into transportation issues. They may not be able to afford the transportation. Their car may break down, any of those types of things. There might be wars in between themselves and the next place where they're going. And again, there's any number of things. These are just a couple of examples of what might be considered intervening obstacles in migration. The next law that we look at is if someone does happen to take a long distance move, they're more likely to move to a large city. This is kind of what we discussed with the gravity model. Again, it's this idea that if someone's moving, they're going to need to find economic opportunities, and so they're going to need to find a job. So where are they most likely to find a job? In a large city. Where are they most likely to find people who they know, not necessarily who they know, but are similar to them? Well, that's in a large city. And again, a large city tends to provide for them a lot of the opportunities that suburban and maybe rural places would not, including housing and things along those lines. Rural residents are much more likely to move than urban residents, and that's mainly because rural residents tend to be moving towards the city. It was not too long ago that we actually became a world where more than 50% of the people lived in the cities. And so rural people living in rural areas tend to be moving towards the urban areas looking for jobs. And then if you are a young adult, you are much more likely to move than an older person. And we talked a little about this earlier in the unit, this idea that someone between the ages of 18 and 30 is much more likely to move because of the changes that are taking place in their life. Maybe they're not tied down to a place, and so that's going to keep them from moving to a new location. And the last one is that all migrations are going to create a counter stream. I believe we discussed this a little earlier. Again, the idea there is that whenever people are moving into a place, people are always going to be moving out, whether it's because it becomes too crowded in the space, maybe because the people that are moving in, the people that are living there don't necessarily like them, and that could be because of race issues, because of ethnicity issues. It could be because the people moving in are impoverished, and the neighborhood begins changing. Again, it could be any number of issues that would cause somebody to move out of an area because of migration. And lastly, we'll talk about this. This doesn't necessarily apply to Ravenstein's laws of migration. It's just an idea called chain migration, and it's very similar to some of the things we've talked about. Basically, it's this idea that when an immigrant moves to a place, they're most likely to migrate where others are who are similar to themselves. And again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that it gives them a connection. It gives them a place to start. The person that they know or people who are like themselves can help them get plugged into the community, maybe help them get a job, help them apply for loans for a house, any of these types of things. And again, a lot of it has to do with them being comfortable in a new place. You think about how difficult it is to move to a new place. Anything that's going to be of help and help someone become comfortable, of course, is going to be an added bonus. That's all for now. When we come back next time, we're going to be looking at what are called what is called the model on migration transition, which was developed by Wilbur Zielinski.